normally doesn't work the last few days. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jasoda Nandana Bratajana Rajana Jasoda Nandana Bratajana Rajana Jamuna Tira Vanashari Jamuna Tira Vanashari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Thank you, everyone. Narayana Namaskritam, Naram Sheva Narotanam, Deva Sarasokam Vyasam, Tato Jayam Udiraye, Nasha Preshu Abhadreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Utamashloke, Bhakti Bhavati Naishriki, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you everyone for coming. We'll be reading from the 10th canto. Thank you. No, that's okay. We'll be reading from the 10th canto, chapter 47. No, chapter 47, yes, verse 27. Let's see, is that right? Is that wrong? I think that's wrong, right? Do you guys have a phone? Everyone has a phone. So verse 27. Everyone ready? Here we go. This one's Sarvatma Bhavo Adikrito Bhavatinam Adoksaje Virahena Mahabhaga Mahame Anugraha Kritaha Sarvatma Bhavo Adikrito Bhavatinam Adoksaje Virahena Mahabhaga Mahame Anugraha Kritaha Sarvatma Bhavo Adikrito Bhavadinam Adoksaje Virahena Mahabhaga Mahan Me Anugraha Kritaha. Save Nanda, anybody else? Okay. Sarva Atma, wholehearted. Bhavaha, love. Adikritaha, claimed by rights. Bhavatinam, by you. Agdokshaje, for the transcendental Lord. Vidahena, through this mood of separation. Mahabhagaha, O most glorious ones. Mahan, great. Me, to me. Anugraha, mercy. Kritaha, done. Translation and purport by the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Translation. You have rightly claimed the privilege of unalloyed love for the transcendental Lord, O most glorious Gopis. Indeed, by exhibiting your love for Krishna in separation from him, you have shown me great mercy. Purport. The Gopis showed not only Uddhava, but the whole world the joy of love of Godhead, and thus they bestowed their mercy on everyone. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, because their loving devotion was executed in an appropriate way, their love brought the Supreme Lord under their control. Still, to show the intensity of their love, he apparently left them, but now he again manifested himself among them, becoming spiritually present through their intense devotion. Amagyantamanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai, thank you everyone for coming. I had a realization this morning, and Krishna always wants you to realize how disqualified you are. So this class, before I get to the class, what I was going to speak about, it's going to be about keeping your peace of mind. And this morning, my peace of mind was completely disturbed. So we'll see how I do in class today. Because I left one jacket that Mother Rohini gave me in the temple. I didn't really realize I didn't have it for like a couple days or so. And it's a jacket, I believe I left it in Jitendra's room. I asked him, have you seen it this morning? He was like, we'll look out for it. You know, it was like no compassion. I'm pretty sure I left it in here, but so Krishna always wants to humble you, realize how disqualified you are, because I'm about to speak about maintaining your peace of mind. And just to let you know, my peace of mind is completely disrupted. And so we shouldn't really think we're qualified at anything. There's a nice quote. It says, humility is a strange thing. The minute you think you've got it, you've lost it. And so that's a preface to the class today, and more like a disclaimer that whatever I'm speaking about, I try my best, but I don't have full realizations, and that's also a good thing because Krishna always keeps you humble. So so normally to get to the class, I usually start off with a quote that will set the theme of what we'll be discussing today. So this quote is by an unknown author, and he says, or she says, quote, "Your life becomes a masterpiece when you learn to master peace." End quote. So I'll repeat that again. Quote, "Your life becomes a masterpiece when you learn to master peace." End quote. Isn't that a really good one? So in this regard, today's verse describes how the Gopis master peace, or rather, how the Gopis mastered prema. How? They had no attachment for anything or anyone other than Krishna. Therefore, today's verse begins with Sarva Atma. They wholeheartedly, unalloyed devotion, had attachment for Krishna. And the previous verse says they had no attachment for anything material or nor attachment for their family members. So the lesson to be learned is this. And I'm teaching you what not to do based on what I just told you. The lesson to be learned is this. If we have attachment for anything or anyone other than Krishna, then when that thing or person is taken away, then our peace of mind is taken away as well. Krishna bhakta nishkama ate eva shant bhuti muti siddhi kami sakaliya shant. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 149, Lord Chaitanya, he famously tells Sri Rupa Goswami that a Krishna bhakta is not me. A Krishna bhakta is always shanta, peaceful. Why? Because they desire nothing but Krishna. A Maya bhakta, on the other hand, is always ashanta, disturbed. Why? Because they desire everything but Krishna. So, for example, if a child is eating candy, and that candy is taken away by his mother, then his peace of mind is also taken away as well, right? So, similarly, when we've achieved the sweetness of honor and respect, but if that honor and respect is taken away, then our peace of mind is also taken away as well. And we see that with celebrities, you know, when they commit some mistake and they lose all their fame, their money, their whole life becomes very miserable. So this is a lesson that attachment to respect, to honor, to fame, yes, it's nice, but when it's taken away, then your life is in shambles. So what does that mean? Our happiness should be come from something other than money, fame, or powers. It should come from only Krishna consciousness. So that's the difference between a child or somebody who's immature in their Krishna consciousness. They're attached to the sweetness of honor and respect. On the other hand, An adult realizes that candy is a want and vegetables are a need. Similarly, when we're mature in our Krishna consciousness, then we're less concerned about our material position and more concerned about our spiritual disposition. Sarvo padi virna mutam tapada dvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchate. This is a famous verse that Srila Prabhupada will quote, but it's also it's from another scripture, but it's reproduced in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Madhya Lila chapter 19, verse 171, where Lord Chaitanya also tells Rupa Goswami. He says, Sarvo Padi is broken up into two words, Sarva and Upadis, but when they're combined together, it becomes Sarvopadi. So, what is Upadis? It means material position. And what is Bhakti? Spiritual disposition. So, Krishna consciousness means that our peace of mind is attained when we're less concerned about Upadis, material position, and more concerned about our Bhakti, our spiritual disposition. And so these are some points to keep in mind. So, speaking of the Gopis, this is an interesting point that that we see that the Gopis, they were so in love with Krishna. Just like I was mentioning, I believe, last week, there's a nice verse from the Brahma Samhita, a very famous one. It says, Primanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundara achinta guna swarupam govindam aripurusham tamaham bhajami. It says when one's eyes are anointed with Primanjana charita, the ointment of love of God, that means you see God's presence everywhere, just like in this mundane world when you're in love with somebody, or so-called in love, but still is a good example. You don't notice anything but your lover everywhere. Everything reminds you of your lover. So we see that because the Gopis were so in love with Krishna, they weren't thinking like, oh, you know, this Prabhu got a better position than me, they got more money than me, they got more fame than me. Why? Because when you're in love with Krishna, when you're in love, you don't care about any of these upadis, these titles. You only care about the teachings. And what is that teaching? Humility. So it's not like the Gopis were trying to be humble. They were so in love, they transcended humility. They were so in love with Krishna. So this is a lesson we could take, that if we are attached to anything material, these ever-changing titles, because what happens, you know, I may have a title in a business, in a managerial position, but the thing is that eventually it's going to be taken away either through our death or the death of our character. Still, it's going to be taken away. So if our happiness is dependent on that, you know, then our peace of mind is taken away. Just like Michael Jordan, he probably had the most successful career without any injury, which is surprising. I'm surprised nobody tried to injure him even more. So he was, surprisingly, he got scot-free from his, you know, from anyone trying to really injure him. Still, he had the most successful basketball career, but still, it's dukkha layam ashashatam. The Gita says his world is dukkha layam, miserable. And even if it wasn't miserable, like Michael Jordan, you could say his career wasn't miserable at all. He had the most happy career. But still, the Gita says ashashvatam, it's temporary, which ultimately transforms to misery, right? You can't play basketball when you have a pot belly and you want trying to dunk with a pot belly. You can't do that. So our happiness shouldn't come from our material position. It should come from our spiritual disposition. Sarvopadi virna mutam tapada dvena nirmalam rishikena rishikeshana sevanam bhaktir uchate. It should come from our Savior and our devotional service to Krishna. So the Gopis, they had no attachment for these titles, these positions. Like Mahajan. So we hear Mahajano yena gatasan pataha. We should follow the example of the great souls, the Mahajans. Now, maybe a few devotees, we'll see if anyone knows this, but not like I know, it's like Jeopardy. You know, on Jeopardy, the host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek. Now, you would think, oh, he's so smart, he's on television, but he already knows the answers. So similarly, I looked up the answer right before, so when I'm asking you a question, it's not like I realized it or memorized it, I wrote it down. So FYI, it's a disclaimer. I'm not saying as if I know this. I looked up the answer, and I'll see if you know this, just to keep us enthused. So it's described in the Bhagwatam. Prabhupada mentioned it so many times in this lecture. He says there are 12 Mahajans, or authorities in Krishna consciousness, 12 that are mentioned. And so can any of us name any of them? And so where's my pen? I'll cross out. Does anybody have a pen? Got my pen. I have to cross them out. Here. Oh. Can anyone name any of them? Thank you. So I'll cross out those. Name any of the Mahajans, the 12 Mahajans. Yes. Just guess, anyone. Even if it's wrong, just guess. Bingo. He got, so even if you... No, no, yes, well, that goes to my other point, but the 12 Mahajans mentioned in the Srimad Bhagwatam. So yeah, so FY, sorry about that. The 12 Mahajans that's described specifically in the Srimad Bhagwatam. Come on, Subal Prabhu. Mother Krishna. Huh? You could tell me the 12? Well, just give me one. Yeah, he said Nardamoni, so just give me one. Yes, Dave. Did I get that? I don't think I wrote that down, but that is one of them, right? I did not see that. Wait, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 13 here. What the hell? All right, I believe Vyasa is one of them, right? But I don't have that name down for some reason. Yeah, give me another one. Bhishma, okay, yes. Bhishma, I got that. Anyone else? Okay, what festival is coming up? So that's one of them. Yeah. Well, who's the primary hero in that pastime? Yes, Prahlad is one of the main authorities. All right, I'll take one more answer. Huh? Shukadeva Goswami. All right, this verse is mentioned. Can anyone? I don't have my phone right now. So these 12 Mahajans are mentioned in the 6th Canto, chapter 3, verse 20 through 21. Can anyone go to that currently to see if Vyasa is in there? Because for whatever reason, I forgot to write them down. And it seems like I have 13 Mahajans here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Huh? Oh, I think I did miss Vyasa. You're right. Bingo. 6th Canto, chapter 3, verse 20 through 21. So anyways, I'll continue, but this is a verse to remember. Well, they are Mahajans, but they're not mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But anyway, this is a verse to remember from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada, if you listen to his lectures, he always mentions these 12. So it's from the 6th Canto, chapter 3, verse 20 through 21. So anyways, the whole point is that the term Mahajan or Maharaj is a upadi, is a title. And of course, that doesn't mean they're not deserving of their title, of course. So that doesn't mean they're not deserving of their title, but they're not attached to being known as a Mahajan. Actually, we see these great souls, they never say I'm a Mahajan, do they? Have you ever seen one? Just like the word, if somebody asks you, are you humble? What will your answer be? Absolutely. I've never met anyone so more humble. So, so like I said, that previous quote, humility is a strange thing. The minute you think you've got it, you've lost it. So we see these great souls, they never say, I'm a Mahajan, but other people, other authorities categorize them as Mahajans. However, so it's 12 listed, and of course the 4 Kumaras, they're categorized as one. So technically speaking, there are what would you add 4 to that? What is that? 15 Mahajans if the 4 Kumaras weren't added as one personality. But we see that the Gopis, interestingly, they're not mentioned in his list. Can you believe that? They never complained. They were like, they never went to Yamaraj. Yamaraj was the one who you could say wrote this list, Yamaraj, and he's also included in this list as well. But the Gopis never went up to Yamaraj It was like, Yamaraj, where's our name on this list of Mahajan? Krishna says in the Bhagavatam that we are the greatest. No, the Gopis weren't. They were so in love with Krishna that they had no attachment or any, you could say, any, they were completely oblivious to any upadi. They weren't like chastising them like, where's our name in this list? But what does Prahlad Maharaj say? What does Prahlad Maharaj? So there's a nice verse in the 7th canto, chapter 7, verse 50, with Prahlad Maharaj. He says, Deva Suro Manushava Yacho Gandharva Evava Bhajan Mukunda Chadanam Swasimasya Yatavayam. What does he say? He says, even if one is a deva, a demigod, a sura, a demon, deva asura, manushava, a human being, a yaksha, or a gandharva. So these are all, you could say, heavenly beings from the heavenly planets. Even if you're a demon, even if you're a demigod, even if you're a yaksha, gandharva, he says, what qualifies one as a Mahajan? If you engage in bhajan mukunda, worship of Krishna, mukunda, another name for Krishna, means the giver of liberation, then what does he say? Then you're just as good as us. And Prabhupada puts in parentheses the Mahajans, headed by Prahlad Maharaj. So yes, the Gopis are Mahajans, and this is precisely what Prahlad Maharaj says. So Prahlad is not, you could say, he's so humble. He's not like arrogant like the conditioned souls in this world where they get some title that they think I'm the chosen one and nobody else is the chosen one. So Prahlad says, actually, if you engage in the worship of Krishna, then you are a Mahajan. So how many Mahajans are there? They say 12, but actually there's unlimited Mahajans. But they may not be listed. So all of us, we should all consider other devotees Mahajans, and we shouldn't consider ourselves Mahajan, because to the degree you think you're a great personality, and when people treat you like you're not, then your peace of mind is taken away. So we see you always maintain this humility that I'm not a Mahajan, everyone else is a Mahajan, everyone else is greater than me. And this is the mentality that the Gopis maintain. So it's important in our life. So the Gopis, they were very secure. They had no attachment, because just like in this world, when you have a college degree, you feel secure. When you have money, you feel secure. When you have youth, you feel secure. And when you have none of these things, you feel insecure, right? But we see the Gopis, they had, none of these things. They had no college, like Karuna Nidhi Prabhu was mentioning in class, I think on Monday. What's today? Friday? Yeah, on Monday. He was like, the Gopis had no education, so they had, no wealth, no prestige, other than from Krishna. But still, they were still content. Why? Because they were less concerned about their material position and more concerned about their spiritual disposition. So they were always feeling secure because their happiness didn't come from anything or anyone other than Krishna. So they weren't thinking, oh, my peers, they went to Harvard. I have to go to Oakton Community College. I should feel bad about myself. We see that usually happen. Or what's their net worth? They have, they're a millionaire, and I'm working my butt off, and I still, can't pay the rent barely. And so we see these things causes problems not only in society but even among devotees. And it shouldn't, because we have these teachings that say we should become free from all these upadis, these material designations. And so we see this is why people either leave Krishna consciousness physically, or you could say spiritually. Their heart is not into it, because why? We're attached. And in the final analysis, we're not humble. We're attached to these titles. But the reality is that we can't really orchestrate, our entire life. Obviously, if we were to control over our life, then we all would be millionaires. I would too. I wouldn't be sitting here giving Bhagavatam. I'd be somewhere else enjoying material life. But sometimes it's considered a great blessing when Krishna take your opulences away through some misery, through some miseries, because there's no happiness other than Krishna consciousness, and that's a fact. So the Gopis were feeling very secure. So have you guys heard this word? And I never really knew what it meant, because I've heard this word insecure my whole life, right? They're insecure, and because they're insecure, that's why they're, they have to make others feel bad or something. And it's true, but from you guys' perspective, what does insecure mean? Because have you heard that before? I've heard it, so many times growing up, but I never really know. I couldn't understand it because especially when somebody was, you could say pretty, I would hear the word insecure attributed to people who had material opulences. And it was people who had material opulences and they would mistreat others. And sometimes people will say, oh, they're just insecure, that's why they're mistreating you. Now, I have a realization about that, a realization I normally share almost in every class, but what is your understanding of the word insecure? Insecure. Anybody? Can you get the mic also? So, Jaya, thank you. To make this more interactive, so there would be no sleeping. I know, you guys for manga artsy, so I try to make this interactive, as entertaining as possible to keep you awake. So, what is your understanding of the word insecure? Especially maybe also when you understood it when you were younger, and maybe you have a different conception being in Christian consciousness. Maybe I don't know.
Growing up, just being a girl, you hear that a lot, and you see it very often. So growing up, it was a lot of what I associated with is you don't feel good enough.
Yeah.
And so in any situation, you didn't feel good enough, and you're projecting kind of that fear or the insecurity, that thought you had. So you lash out on people because if you can't have it, they can't have it, kind of thing. So you see that a lot within that community of insecurity. So you just don't feel like you're worthy enough. So you either accumulate more things, or you start lashing out and doing things to make other people feel lesser and you feel better. So that's my interpretation.
Yes, that's exactly the definition I was looking for. But can anyone top that? Maybe you could top the exact definition I was looking for. Anybody? No, so it is the exact definition. So when we're feeling insecure about ourselves, let's say we have no college degree, then naturally what happens, there's a hypothetical scenario that happens in many relationships. You may be best friends with your friend your whole life, even in high school. But what happens when you come to high school, you have to separate it from each other. You move on to different lives. And usually the next stage in people's life after high school is college. So hypothetically speaking, suppose both you and your friend apply for, college, but one friend gets into Harvard, and then another person was only accepted at Oakton Community College. And so what normally happens, either the friend that was accepted to Harvard, either he becomes proud, or the other friend who was accepted to Oakton Community College, he becomes envious. So we see in this world, those are the main two primary things that causes disharmony in relationships, even among devotees, is pride and envy. So a person who goes to Harvard, he may not be proud, but somebody who's envious of him may consider him to be proud. And so in this way, so even a person who's so-called secure, like you could say, person who's accepted at Harvard, they're also insecure if they're proud. Because what does that mean? Insecure means you have no security, right? And what does that mean? What does Rupa Goswami say in the first lesson of the Nectar of Instruction? In order to keep yourself out of trouble, you have to secure your tongue. So that's security. So even a person who's going to Harvard, he doesn't secure his tongue, and what happens? He ruins his relationship. Where are you going? I'm going to Harvard. Where are you going? Oh, the community college, I'm so sorry. So sometimes this happens in relationships. Why? Because we're insecure, meaning even if you have money, wealth, you're insecure because you don't secure your tongue, and therefore you ruin all of your relationships. So there's a nice story in this regard. Once upon a time, a father wanted to teach his 18-year-old son, Jason, a lesson on taming the tongue. Why? Of course, Subal, probably you heard this story, that's why you smile. I've repeated this like a million times. But the few people who haven't heard this story, I'll repeat it again. So actually, I'll continue the story over, but basically Prabhupada, I don't mind repeating the same lessons over and over again, because what do we do every day? We eat every day, right? And actually, it's the same food every day made in like different varieties, right? And it seems a little bit different, but it's actually the same ingredients, made in different ways, in different cooks. So what are we doing? So it's necessary to feed ourselves wisdom every day, so we repeat the same things every day. And in Prabhupada's purport to the Gita, chapter 2, verse 25, he says, Things need to be repeated over and over again so that we understand the matter thoroughly without error, because we forget, right? So that's why we remind ourselves. So I don't have a problem with repeating the same lessons and stories, but of course I mix it up a little bit. But this is a nice story. So once upon a time, a father wanted to teach his 18-year-old son, Jason, a lesson on taming the tongue. Why? Because all throughout Jason's life, he was always the most popular kid. He was a straight-A student, and he was the star athlete on his basketball team. Consequently, Jason became very proud by thinking, I can say anything to anyone and get away with it. But his father warned him. He says, my dear Jason, it doesn't matter how powerful we are or how powerful we think we are. We can always be humbled by Almighty God. But Jason, like most teenagers, did not listen to his father. But circumstances will humble him the hard way. So indeed, during Jason's freshman, sophomore, and junior year in high school, he always made the basketball team. But during his senior year, he got cut from the team. Why? Because his best friend, Eric, told him that the new basketball coach for his senior year was the father of one of the students he bullied all throughout high school. So the moral of the story is, just as criminals who escape from prison will cause problems for all of human society, so when our bad qualities escape from us through our words and our actions, they cause problems for us and potentially for others. How does the government subdue criminals? With security guards. In much the same way, it's described in the Bhagwatam, Yasyasti Bhattir Bhagavatiya Kinchana, Starva Gunais Tatra Samasate Suraha. A wise person subdues the bad qualities with good qualities. We subdue pride with humility, envy with appreciation, and vengeance with forgiveness. And this is how you remain secure. And so there's a nice quote. It says, as long as a word remains unspoken, you are its master. Once you utter it, you are its slave. And we see that in society every day. You know, you speak some racist, sexist word or some insult, some criticism, then it's only a matter of time before you receive the reaction to that insult, that criticism, etc. So I normally quote another quote, but I'll mix it up. So there's also a related quote by Plato. He says, wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. And so we should question whether our interactions with devotees is just talking for talking's sake. And so Shruti Shruti Purana Adi Panchadati Vidyanvina Aikantiki Hare Bhaktir Upatayaiva Kalpate. This is a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And it's Prabhupada quotes it. I don't remember which verse, but Prabhupada quotes it in his purport to the Gita, chapter 7, verse 3. And it's a very important verse. He says, this Rupa Goswami says, and Prabhupada quotes it in his purport to the Gita, chapter 7, verse 3. It says, devotional service, which means sadhu sangha, our interactions with the other. Devotional service that ignores the Shruti, the Shriti, the Puranas, the scriptures, the Gita, the Bhagavatam. Devotional service in our interactions with each other that ignores these scriptures is simply an unnecessary disturbance. And what is that disturbance? It's disturbing our own mind. If we're not reading these scriptures, then we'll remain insecure, right? The fault finding will just come out and come out. And so if you have, so Prabhupada says, if you have some statement to make, if you glorify all devotees, then you don't have to know any scriptures. But if you want to criticize devotees, then you better know what you're talking about. And usually we see in the scriptures when, when we're so attached to this fault finding, it may not always be the case. There are exceptions where Krishna empowers somebody. That's another matter. Empower somebody to fault find to test our good qualities. That's also another matter too. But generally speaking, if our interactions with each other is just like, let me have a good time, let me just have a conversation, and we're not really sincere in reading these books and trying to sincerely share it with each other and uplift our consciousness, then what happens? We remain insecure. We're either proud, we criticize others due to pride, or we criticize others due to the envy. And so we could test for ourselves. Just like, what changed my perspective in Krishna consciousness is that, everyone has their, favorite speakers naturally. But one thing that changed my life, I didn't even have to hear a whole lecture or a seminar, but one devotee who lived here for many years, his name was Gokula Nanda Prabhu. And he cleverly told me Like, as in, it's people have faults. But he was actually talking about me probably. But he said, you know, you can't normally come at somebody and say, Prabhu, you have a fault. Why? Because we have our ego, right? And the ego, as soon as your ego flares up, you can't hear anything. But when you say, you know what, I heard somebody who had a fault. And this is actually the technique that Narada Muni did. So FYI, if we want to share lessons with each other to try to help uplift others' consciousness, it should be in a mood of humility. And one of those aspects of humility is that unless somebody has accepted you as their mentor, then you shouldn't come down on them hard like a guru. But still, nevertheless, if we want to try to help each other, uplift each other, and change, you could say, trying to elevate the consciousness, here's one technique that Narada Muni recommends. And it shouldn't be in a mood we see as if we don't have any faults, because we all have faults. We all have the same faults to faults. But still, nevertheless, we should try to help each other uplift our consciousness, especially when it comes to criticizing devotees. So Narada Muni, he was the guru of one king named King Prachini Barhishat. So when he was describing some pastimes of Krishna consciousness to King Prajini Barhishat, Narada Muni says, you know, once upon a time, it was a king, and he was so puffed up, he was so arrogant, he was this. And then finally, at the end of the lecture, King Prajini Barhishat, he was like, really, man, that sounds a lot like my life. Then Narada Muni says, bingo. So he let him come to the realization that, yes, because Narada Muni understood that we all have our ego, is so powerful, then when somebody says, you know, you have this fault, you have that fault, then we're not willing to listen. But if we say they have a fault, then, and actually this is the story of the Bhagavatam, because they're actually describing so many faults of different personalities, but actually it's the same faults we have. So that's the good thing about hearing Bhagavatam, is that when you hear these faults, they're actually related to our own life. And so in this way, that's why we should always encourage people to hear the Bhagavatam, because it's really the same exact technique that Narada Muni did. So actually, it would probably be a little bit more detrimental if we had that motivation, if we go up to a specific devotee and say, once heard of once upon a time there was an arrogant, puffed up devotee, and they'll get the hint, because that's our intentions. People are very intuitive. They'll get the hint. So what's the lesson? We should encourage people to hear Bhagavatam. That way, you know, people, they'll know our intentions. We can't hide our intentions usually. There was a puffed up devotee, they'll know we're talking about them. So the whole point is that I have no idea what the whole point is. I went on a tangent. I forgot my original point. What was the original point? Does anybody remember? I was gonna say. Insecurity. Oh yeah, Gokula Nanda. So one thing that Gokula Nanda Prabhu shared with me, and he was probably talking about me. He says, you know, usually when people, you ask people, do you have any questions on Krishna in the Bhagavatam, which, you know, in the past, you know, because I've been here for almost 20 years, can't believe I'm getting old. I've been coming since I was 16. But when I would come to Bhagavatam class, I didn't have many questions. You know, my first question to one Maharaj, His Holiness Chandramali Maharaj, he was so humble about it. He says, are there any questions? It was in one of my first classes with him. He said, are there any questions? I didn't know he meant about the Bhagavatam. I thought he meant about anything, the latest movie, what was Michael Jordan doing? So my question to him was, when's Prasadam ready? And it wasn't rude. He could understand that. I was new. I was fairly new. Only been coming maybe a year or less than a year. I don't know. But he was very humble about it. Yes, he asked the devotees, when's Prasadam ready? And they said 9 o'clock. So he's like, 9 o'clock. He didn't say, you he probably knows what I'm about to say, but he didn't say you idiot or anything. He was very humble about it, because he could understand, because he was very secure. He could understand I was a new person, and I have no taste for Srimad Bhagavatam. But one thing that changed my perspective is this devotee, Gokula Nanda. He says, if you ask anybody, do you have any questions on the Srimad Bhagavatam? And he's like, their answer usually is, no, I'm good. And he says, ask anybody, do you have any questions on the latest gossip? Oh, yes, who, what, where, when, and why? And so he was probably criticizing me, but by saying others, because I'm sure I had that mentality. I'm pretty sure I had that mentality since I didn't have much attraction. And so this is one method we could use. And devotees are very merciful. I can understand. Oh, yes, I don't need to hear a whole seminar. This is exactly what I do. I have questions on the latest gossip, but I have no questions on the latest Bible. In this way, we'll remain insecure. and we'll remain in trouble all the time. So this is a lesson we could take. But one other point I forgot to mention is that if we don't secure our bad qualities, or you could say, how often should our bad qualities be secured? How often should our bad qualities be secured? Some of the time, most of the time, or all of the time? What do you think? If somebody's in prison for, you say, quadruple murder, we never hear the security guard say, it's Christmas, let them see their family so they can take out their whole other rest of their family. Or, let them go see their girlfriend or their whole family so they could do another massacre. No, criminals should be subdued, not some of the time, not most of the time, but all of the time. So there's a nice verse in the Gita, chapter 3, verse 31. It says, Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manavaha shradhavansu anusunyansu muchante teapi kamarbihi. This verse from the Gita says, we should read the Gita, not some of the time, not most of the time, but all of the time. And so Bashu Ghosh Prabhu, he quoted a verse from Bhagwatam yesterday. And it's a verse we normally say before speaking Bhagwatam. This is from the Srimad Bhagwatam, Canto 1, chapter 2, verse 18. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishiki. We should subdue we should read the Bhagavatam not some of the time, not most of the time, but nityam. Nityam. So both the verses had nityam in it. Nityam means all of the time, all of the time. So even the Chaitanya, there's a nice verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Antya Lila, chapter 5, verse 89. It says, Chaitanya Charitamrita Nitya Kadapan Yaha Haite Premananda Bhakti Tattva Gyan. The Chaitanya Charitamrita should be read not some of the time, not most of the time, but nityam, all of the time. So there's you could say, unlimited scriptures, unlimited service to keep ourselves occupied, but one of the most important services we hear is Shravanam Kirtan, a hearing. So if our hearing and our chanting is going down, a lot of times we say, okay, we emphasize the chanting, but how often do we emphasize the hearing? What is our hearing? Because the reality is we have to go to school, we have to go to work, we don't have to associate with our mundane friends, but to keep our family and friends relationships, you could say, more sane. Sometimes we are forced to go to family reunions, this obligation, that obligation. But generally speaking, what are people hearing all the time? They're hearing gossip. That's all. So if we're hearing all this fault-finding gossip, because if people don't have then what's going to happen? That's going to weigh on your consciousness. And so the whole purpose of hearing these teachings is so how we can remain secure. That way our friendships will remain secure, our peace of mind will remain secure. So this is a lesson we could take in our own life. The importance. Nobody can make you develop a taste. You have to develop. If you don't want to take the time sincerely to study on your own. Of course, we have different, you could say, bhakti shastris, different programs. But in the final analysis, that's not going to help you get the taste. What's going to help you get the taste is your own willingness. Your own willingness. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavita mati hi kriyatam yadikuto api labhyate tatra lolyam api mulyam ekalam jama koti sukratir na labhyate. This verse says, pure Krishna consciousness isn't obtained by millions of years of pious activity. How is it attained? Lolyam, greed. You want to. And why would we want to have greed for Krishna consciousness? Because people think, I remember my brother, he gave sometimes every year there's different Christian college groups or high schools who come to the temple. And there's usually Subal Prabhu has dealt with many of them over the years, and so has my brother when he was here earlier. And so one year, a teacher brought a whole, I think a Christian high school to the temple. And so after my brother gave the summary of what our spiritual practices are, and so he took questions in the end. And so one of the questions that one of the students asked my brother was, what do you guys do for fun? What do you guys do for fun? And so my brother says an interesting answer. You mean performing devotional service and reading the Bible? These are not fun? So if they're not fun, then how long will you do them? And so if we don't find our fun in Krishna consciousness, in securing our tongue, securing our bad qualities, then we'll just remain in trouble. And just like what happens when your bad qualities come out, just like lust. What happens when lust, you say some sexual harassment or do something, or your anger, you say something that you regret. It may be fun at the moment, right? But what happens is miserable in the end, right? And so it's no fun when you're, you could say, kicked out or excommunicated, or your whole reputation is tarnished. Is that fun? No, it's not fun. So in order to, you could say, keep having fun in Christian consciousness, we have to secure our tongue, like Rupa goes. Even in the Bible, there's a nice verse in the Bible, one of my favorite ones, in the book of James, chapter 3, verse 7 through 10. It says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it, we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My dear brothers and sisters, this should not be. Archayam eva hade ye. Pujam ya shraddhaye hate natabadeshu chanyeshu sa bhakta prakita shmitaha. This is another verse that Karunanidhi Prabhu quoted on Monday. And it's also a verse that I believe Prabhupada quotes from the Srimad Bhagwatam in his commentary to the Nectar of Instruction, text 5, I believe. And it talks about the different categories of devotees, if I'm correct. So this verse on the Bhagavatam, I don't remember which verse, is Canto 11, but I don't remember which verse. I believe it's 11.247, actually. Krishna gives the, now can anyone look that up? 11.247, and I'll continue. So 11.247. So this verse says, if one is engaged in archam, the worship of the deity or worship of God, but who does not show proper respect to devotees or to people in general, because sometimes we think we're better, like, you know, I'm a devotee and they're all demons, and sometimes we superficially imitate Prabhupada's language. Prabhupada has so much. What was Prabhupada's sacrifice? He preached Krishna consciousness for 45 years without experiencing no results. Can you imagine doing book distribution for 45 years and everyone saying no? Hey, get a job, old man. You know, go make some stuff for your life. He preached Krishna consciousness for 45 years. Now, Krishna, he's not going to torture us like that. He gives us some results, just like, you know, recently, the last several Harinams, you know, Donovan Prabhu and Naveen Mataji, you know, they do book distribution. And so they got some results. They got some of the last few Harinams we do. And, but Prabhupada, you know, pretty much, can you imagine at 45 years, you know, you're like, you know, Hare Krishna, you know, everyone's walking like you by your ghost. That's pretty much what it was like for Prabhupada for 45 years. But how did he maintain his enthusiasm? Because he was less concerned about his material position and more concerned about his spiritual disposition. This verse mentions the word adoksaje. So there's also another famous verse from the Bhagavatam 127. It says, Savai pumsam paro dharma yatobatir adoksaje, ahaituki apratihata yaya ama suprasidati. It says bhakti, pure bhakti, the supreme dharma for all human society, it describes what bhakti is, what devotion is. Actually, apratihata, it's unending, it's uninterrupted. You can't really call it devotion if it's interrupted, right? It's not devotional service, it's circumstantial service. Hey, Prabhu, would you like to engage in some circumstantial service? When the circumstances are good, you know, I'm a nice person, and when they're not, I'm not so devotional. I'm commotional. So actually, it's not devotional service. So actually, for ourselves in our immaturity, we're not really engaging in devotional service. We're engaging in conditional service or circumstantial service. And when those conditions and those circumstances are taken away, what happens? People's devotion, their devotional service is taken away. And what is it replaced with? Like Jitendra said, commotional service. And so we've all seen that, you know, you can't avoid that in Kali Yuga. So I'll mention one last point. So this whole class was about maintaining your peace of mind. So anyone can, we see the Gopis were peaceful in all circumstances of life, right? Because they had such love for Krishna. Now, what's the demarcation between a materialist and a spiritualist before I get to this point? Can anyone briefly tell me? What's the demarcation in your definition? What's the difference between a materialist and a spiritualist? And I'll explain what Prabhupada shares and also what Jesus says, maybe if I have time. What's the difference between a materialist and a spiritualist? Anybody?
For me, it's renunciating, like just renouncing material things and just being a seeker, and your focus is on God and not here.
Yes, yeah. Anyone else? Pretty much, you like bingo. Okay. So yes, so that's also, but when we say things, there's also a subtle thing called respect. That's also a thing. That's my thing. It's respect and honor. That's also a thing. It may not be money, it may not be objects, but that's also a thing that keeps us in a lot of trouble. Even if you're a renunciate, your thing may be respect. And so, so basically, we see the difference between a materialist and a spiritualist is that a materialist, they're happy when they're respected, and they're unhappy when they're disrespected. But if a spiritualist is happy when they're respected and unhappy when they're disrespected, then what's the demarcation between a materialist and a spiritualist? What's that demarcation? What's that line? And so that's why we practice forgiveness, right? And so if we're speaking about forgiveness every day, but we don't forgive, and we don't beg Krishna, ultimately can't do anything without Krishna's mercy, but we beg Krishna for his mercy, then what's that demarcation? Same thing. A materialist is happy when they're honored and unhappy when someone else is honored. But if a spiritualist is happy when they're honored and unhappy when someone else is honored, then what's the demarcation between a spiritualist and materialist? So therefore, Martin Luther King, like I mentioned, he says, nobody is unhappy about praise, even when they know they don't deserve it, and even when they don't believe it. The only people who are unhappy about praise is when that praise is going too much towards somebody else. And so this is exactly what Prabhupada says in many purports, but there's one purport in the 7th canto, chapter 5, verse 12. Prabhupada in that purport says a very important point. He says one should not be proud of one's own devotional service, but one should praise the devotional service of others. And what type of praise? Not motivated praise, like I only praise my Bhakti Shastri Shiksha Guru or my Diksha Guru so I could get initiation. Not that type of praise. Because we see as conditioned souls, that's maybe a motive. But if that's your motive, then you'll remain insecure. Krishna knows your intention. Maya, Mother Nature knows what our intention is. We can't criticize anyone, but as conditioned souls, we do have these, you could say, these faults. That and then we see in the material world, somebody has power. If somebody has more power than us, just like I was on a train yesterday. And I saw this, this African-American big dude. He was like clearly like pumping iron every day, pectoral muscles. I was thinking when I saw him, like, this dude would kill me. I would never criticize him ever. And we see that in the world when somebody has way more power than you, you subdue your tongue. And when somebody has less power than you, you're subdued by your tongue. And this shouldn't be, because Krishna, he can humble anybody. So this is a lesson we could say how to be humble and appreciative with everyone. Not that my gurus comes, not that my bhakti gurus come and I show them respect because I need something from them. But if that's your motivation, we see, Krishna knows what your motivation is, then you'll remain insecure and potentially you may leave Krishna consciousness for the time being, either physically or mentally. So we should always show respect to everyone, whether they have more power than us or whether they have less power than us. And so this is a lesson we could take. I have another story to tell, but not because I went on a tangent. I think we have 10 minutes left. So are there any points, further points anyone wants to share? Other than that, if not, I'll just share my last point. So Subal Prabhu. So.
Thank you, Jai Baldev Prabhuji. I have a couple of observations. I thought, some of the points were very, very nice. One is from the questions of insecurity. That's something quite relevant to meditate on. Everybody, like that type of thing. And one thing that came to mind was the intrinsic need that we all have as spirit souls to be loved and to love. It's just the essence of our existence. you know, this loving relationship that we have with Krishna. And to have that try to be fulfilled in this material world is a lost case, because we're dealing with, selfish type of, arrangements, like that. So undoubtedly, everybody's going to be dissatisfied in some type of dissatisfaction in the material world in different degrees of, intensity. And that brings insecurity. We're always looking for that, perfect relationship. And without that, we're always insecure. That's one thought. And the other one, and then I say the second one, and then you can comment. The other one was from the purport. I thought it was something very beautiful that the devotees, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, quoted Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur saying that the Gopis were showing not only Uddhava but also the world the joy of Krishna consciousness. I thought that's something very amazing, because yesterday I got this video of a kirtan happening in New York. Your brother was there. He looks super stylish. And they have this spontaneous show of their devotion. Maybe like 30, 40 devotees, sitting in Washington Square Park, chanting. And they were performing this beautiful kirtan of Lord Nrsimhadev. And then two devotees just started to dance the pastime, all spontaneously. Such a beautiful presentation. And, among the devotees, it's just the culture was so beautiful. And the expression was so full of devotion and joy that it was devastating. I mean, people were just like, they show pictures of the people in the square watching.
Criticizing.
Not criticizing, completely mesmerized.
Appreciate it. Nice.
It was so beautiful, the presentation of joy, the culture of joy, of devotion, that you don't need to go to people, to tell them, hey, look, they come to you. So I thought that's, the show of the joy. So that's what it is to think.
Jaya, thank you for those points. You reminded me of a few things. Love and be loved. Yes, we all had that desire. But we see in the scriptures, since Prahlad Maharaj's appearance, Narasimha Dev's appearance coming up, and of course the other primary characters in that is Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj. It's described in the Bhagwatam that Hiranyakashipu, he had control. 99.9% of the universe honored him. Only one person, you could say, dishonored him. And that was just a disagreement. Prahlad says, my father, I disagree with you. Krishna's the center of the universe and not you. So we'll have to agree to disagree. But he respected his father, but he took it as a disrespect. So what's the lesson we can take in our own life? Our desire to be loved is mixed with Eka Rajam. In the Bhagavatam, 7th canto, chapter 3, verse 1, it's described that Hiranyakashipu desired to be Eka Rajam. What does that mean? Eka means one, and Rajam means king. He didn't want anybody to get any honor and any respect but himself. So our desire to be loved, yes, we have this desire to be loved, but it's so contaminated with this ego. And what does that mean? I want everything to go my way, everything. Sometimes people don't show us no respect. So what? So many people else show us so much respect. And we see, if one person doesn't show us respect, that's enough to take away 100% of our happiness. And so yes, our desire to be loved is so mixed with this ego. We want everything to go our way, and we don't want anything to go anyone else's way. Even though we have so many things to be grateful for. So many people love us, but as soon as one person doesn't love you or disagrees with you or disrespect you, you're completely neglectful of the many things you could be grateful for. And also, as far as the kirtan you were mentioning in New York is concerned, and the dancing, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur made a very important point. It's described in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. I think chanting the holy name is a chapter, but around that. So he makes a distinction between Hari Kirtan, the external spiritual music, and Hari Katha, the internal spiritual music. What does that mean? That means any instrument, take any instrument or even your voice, any instrument can be tuned, right? So what happens if your instrument is out of tune? It doesn't sound good. In much the same way, if our character is out of tune, we don't sound good. We start criticizing and fault finding. And so it's nice to see kirtans, but what happens when there's no kirtan? Unless you tune your character with Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shavanam Kirtana Hridayanta Stohi Badrani, we do not these two hits the time. Unless you tune your character with hearing the Bhagavatam, then what happens when the kirtan is over? What happens? The fault finding continues. The criticism. Your character is out of tune. So, and this is actually what causes people to have, you could say, less faith in devotees. Oh, they have a nice kirtan afterward, but then what happens afterwards? They start criticizing. And that's why I mentioned this verse from the Bible. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father in kirtan, and with it, we curse human beings after kirtan. My dear brothers and sisters, this should not be. So unless we emphasize to people, and that's what I mentioned to some devotees, we're kind of in recent years, we've been understaffed, right? And many devotees, new devotees have been given, this is my opinion based on what Prabhupada says. I don't have the reference now, but I think one of the most important services is tuning your character by hearing Bhagavatam. And if anyone doesn't exhibit their interest in hearing the Bhagavatam, that's why we should encourage you, like Acharya Nishta Prabhu. I remember one year, when my brother was traveling so much, he was like a main devotee who was here. He asked me one day, what book are you reading right now? And I really wasn't reading, at the time. I was just into kirtan. And I was like, this devotee is so puffed up. What are you reading? So he asked me, what are you reading? I wasn't, really reading Prabhupada's books. I did a lot of writing, but still, it's important to hear and read. But I could appreciate it later, because if we don't hear, we get so agitated at once, constructive criticism question like that. What are you reading? What do you mean what am I reading? And so then I had to lie. I lied about it. I was like, I'm reading The Science of Self-Realization. But I'm pretty sure he knew I was lying. So this is what happens when we're not encouraged. So we should all encourage each other. Take your own time. I know to me, I can't develop any taste if I have to go through Bhakti Sastris like all the time. But take your own time. Develop some fun in this. So anyways, Prabhu, thank you. That's my answer. So, Jaya. Should we end right now? So yes, I think it's a quarter till. We have our regulator here. Normally I go over class, but I can't. Subal Prabhu's here. So please,
thank you.
We could talk afterwards. So otherwise, that's up to you. Can he go? Okay, cool. So yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We'll take it afterwards. Subal Prabhu's here to tune my character. When he's not here, my character's out of tune. I usually go over class. So my character needs some tuning. So thank you, Subal Prabhu.